a strategy meeting. And
We have to start with the.
let's start with the call to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag of
States
the
of
United States of America,
the Republic
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the agenda. Second.
I second.
Moved in second. Any questions or comments on the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any public comments?
No, we don't.
Okay, setting the scope of the meeting, that is the primary work that we have today. And the plan is to report at the next week's meeting of what the agenda or the scope would be for this committee. What I thought about doing is having a brief discussion up front about what our thoughts are. And I've written some notes, and I'd like to start off, and then once you, I'll go through my notes real quickly, and then I'll ask the committee members for their comments, and then other members that are listening to the meeting. First of all, it seems to me that this committee is set up to develop a strategy. And it's a strategy, and I use strategy versus tactics. And I know that's kind of military speak, but a strategy is a series of planning that you do, a lot of it which is contingency planning. So you make some assumptions, and then you say, if this occurs, then our plan is to do X. If something else occurs, then it's our plan to do Y. And that's kind of the way you do that. You have kind of best case scenarios. What's the best case scenario for growth, for example? What's the worst case scenario? And have a plan for both. Because what we want to have is we want to have the ability to have something to start to figure out the tactics, the specifics of how we're going to accomplish the plan. So a strategic plan for this committee, I would propose, is to look 5 to 10 years out. We have some tactics that we got to discuss, because over the next 5 years, we have, with Carol's help in this book, a 5-year enrollment projection. That's not strategy. That's something we have to deal with right now. That's a tactic. But we should be looking an additional 5 years to make sure we don't run down a cul-de-sac and we put ourselves in a position that we say, damn, we didn't think of that. And now we're going to have to switch things around. So you need to have a near term and a long term. And near term is in 5 years, long term is in now 10 years. That's what I would propose. And the specific things we need to look at is property. We need to look at the Lobico property. We need to look at the Ladies Island property. We need to look at King Street property. We need to look at Snake Road and the Ace property. Even though that's not in our county, but that's something that we should be looking at. We should be looking at a new site south of the Broad. And we've had a realtor who's out looking for property for us on that. And this new site south of the Broad, we're looking at a need for approximately 1,353 additional enrollments within five years, 1,353 enrollments. And that's primarily in the Bluffton, Hardyville, Okatee area. We need to look at attendance zones. That map there, I don't know if you can see it on the screen, that shows the attendance zones in different colors for the different schools in the Okatee, Bluffton, Hardyville area. And basically what that shows is the result of non-linear development. Yeah, when I went to high school in the Shawnee Mission district of a suburb of Kansas City, Kansas. And it started out with Shawnee Mission North, the area of Overland Park, went out to the east, so they built Shawnee Mission East. And it also started out to the west, they built Shawnee Mission West. Then they built Shawnee Mission South. So it was a linear progression. And so there you didn't have overlapping attendance zones for schools and for buses and so on. And growth in Bluffton, Hardyville, Okatee have been in pieces, like a measle. And we have done what we had to do to put kids in seats in different schools that had capacity. But we're going to have some way of fixing that, because we can't continue to have that happen because it's inefficient. Buses are passing one another. Kids are getting on a bus, passing an elementary school on their way to their elementary school. That just doesn't make sense. But that's not something that you do like that. That's a strategy on how you're going to evolve into that. We need to look at, and when we look at those attendance zones, we need to look at the Hilton Head, which our projection or Carol's projections say they're going to lose 627 enrollments in 5 years. So 627 enrollments means that maybe we should take people from eastern part of Bluffton and put them on the bus and go over the bridges. Now, today's bridges, that's probably not the best idea, but tomorrow's bridges, if they ever get that sorted out, might not be as much of an issue. That's, again, a strategy that you have to look at. We need to look at resizing of the north of the Broad, where projections say we're going to lose 636 enrollments in the next 5 years. So what has to be done? Well, first of all, a facilities assessment, and facilities assessment is, a lot of it's already in here, but some of it is not. And what is not in there is requirements for perhaps universal mandatory kindergarten. That's a distinct possibility. A even longer range possibility is universal requirement for pre-K, ages 4 and up. 3 and 4, I think, is what they've been talking about. Now, that's again a longer term. I was talking to Ted Barber, our chair of our clock, today when we were out and looking at the Robert Smalls and the Battery Creek construction. And I mentioned something to him about facilities assessment. He said, you know, I've done that for many years for Coca-Cola, and there's a process to do that. He said, I'd be willing to come in and talk to a committee about that. It's free work, and it may be a good start for this committee's work to have Ted come in and talk to us about how the corporate world does this kind of thing. And obviously Coca-Cola worldwide is pretty significant. We need to look at pre-referendum design work. I believe this committee needs to look at that, and that's something that finance and operations need to look at. We have to look at bond strategy. Now that we are where we're at on our contingency and the need to use bond premiums, we need to relook at our bond strategy, because we had thought that we would be able to fund a next referendum without having to raise millage. But that's with old cost data. New cost data means we may have to have even another look at a revised strategy for bonding the next referendum. We need to look, Nakia, at education strategy. One of the options we have, or one of the questions we're going to have to answer, and answer relatively soon, is do we build a K-8 school on the May River campus, or do we build a elementary school and a middle school? Now that's a numbers issue, and it's an education issue. The education department's got to get talk about is what's the future, and that also means what we look at for Ladies Island Middle School. Should that be a Ladies Island Middle School is probably going to have to be torn down and rebuilt. Yeah. What's it going to be rebuilt as? A K-8, a middle school, and an elementary school? We got problems at Coosaw and people in trailers there. So that's an education strategy. What's the best? K-8. There's some advantages and disadvantages of both. Mandatory kindergarten, mandatory pre-K. Also, CTE strategy. We don't know yet what we're going to put in the CTE building that we're going to be designing with this referendum's money. We haven't heard exactly what's going to go in there, and that has a major impact on the construction of that building. And we've got more demand than we have supply of CTE positions. If you talk to ACE and you look at our enrollment numbers and our existing CTE, we got waiting lists, especially for welding, auto mechanics, and we haven't even tapped the plumbing, electrician, HVAC. That I just talked to Dallas Carlton about that today too, and he's trying to get something going north of the Broad about improving that. So that's another issue that really is in the ISD arena.
Kathy Robine.
Join the meeting.
Thank you, Kathy. We also, another issue to look at in strategy is competition by charter schools. You know, if you have not read about the new Republican candidate for superintendent of schools for the state, and she is a charter school proponent. So what will increased competition by charter schools have, and where we are at and what we have? We still have impact fees to discuss, and that I believe could be in the purview of this committee, because that affects how we fund future growth. Lastly is developing a milestone plan. There are some things that we have to get on right away. And I believe personally that right away we need to figure out what we're going to build where south of the Broad. And hopefully we can find the funds to do the design work, because we're going to need, I believe, based on the data I've seen in this book, that we're gonna need to do the same thing we did with the extensions for May River and River Ridge and have shovel ready to go, because we're gonna need to break ground in 2020, January 2024, like we did when we did this year, to have a school ready in 26. Would you agree?
Well, you could have it ready by 25.
Well, 25.
If you started January
24,
ready
yeah.
by 25.
We're gonna probably need that.
Yeah.
So that is kind of a stream of consciousness to start the discussion. And so I'll turn to Earl. What do you think?
What you said is we need to discuss.
Can Earl start over? I really can't hear him well.
Yeah, I think that also that we need to look and see whether we can get some of these developers to donate some property. You know? Because we're gonna need a lot of property. Because the way Bluffton is going, I don't think you have to worry too much about this side. But if we have to go to a new Ladies Out Middle School, do we have, how much property we got in the back of that school?
Oh, the total acreage, I don't know off the top of my head. There's enough in that football field area to build a school.
So,
And we
So
tear,
what we're doing at Robert's Hall.
yeah, we tear down the building and the fields and build in the front.
but those are the two things that I think we should look at. As far as kindergarten and pre-K, I think we need to sit down and talk with, what's the gentleman's name?
Williams?
Yeah, Williams at EOC.
Oh, yeah.
You know, what their plans are. You know.
Anything else, Earl?
I think that's about it.
Okay. Dr. Claus.
Yeah, Earl, can you just once again say the two things just real briefly that you thought were important?
Land donation
Yep.
and look at the new school for Ladies Out Middle School, and also pre-K
Early childhood.
and early childhood.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I would say, Dick, your thoughts, I think, are very well taken, and I think everything you mentioned is important, as what Earl has added on as being important. I just see this as an overwhelming task for a committee. I just cannot see us addressing all of those issues. I think we could meet, 24/7, 365 days a year, and I still don't think we would probably accomplish all those things. So I think we need to break it down to what are our immediate strategies or goals. I think some of those would be, as already mentioned, an assessment of our facilities. We have quite a bit of an assessment of our facilities by that, our CIP booklet. Also, as you mentioned, Dick, assessing property we have that's not currently being utilized or is being utilized, like you mentioned, the King Street property, and is that the best utilization of those properties? Because I think ultimately what our task is to try to determine what are we going to bring forward to the board? What are our recommendations going to be to fully utilize the facilities we have? And, what's the practicality of that? Taking into consideration where we're going to have growth and where we're going to have lack of growth, actually the opposite, less enrollment in areas. And as mentioned, another immediate need that seems to be talked about a lot and seems like it's necessary certainly is a school, as you mentioned, Dick, in south of the Broad. So I would try to make our scope sort of like to assess, I don't know, I'm just speaking off the top of my head, that the purpose of this committee is really to assess our current facilities utilization and how we are going to, make suggestions with the growth or lack of growth in the county, and it's a county-wide school system, and how we're going to make recommendations. And by recommendations, I mean to the board on funding. And that, because that would include a lot, like impact fees, et cetera, bonds, future referendums, et cetera. So those are kind of my comments.
Okay. Mel, I see your hands up. Mel Campbell?
We can't hear you.
Mel, you are still
You're muted, Mel.
muted.
Yeah,
There
I
you go.
know. Can I take a pass? I've just got a telephone call. I got to answer that.
Okay,
All
right.
I'll do that.
we'll come back to you then. Go ahead. Let's see, who else is on? Is David on the
David's on and Kathy is on.
David, do you have something to add?
Not really. I just want to emphasize that you do need a doable scope. And I was under the impression that this was to prep for the referendum. And that was the target.
Yeah.
But, that was just my impression. Somehow, because we have to get ready for the next referendum. And that would encompass some of the things that you all have talked about. Unused property, underutilized facilities. Because, we promised last time we would look at underutilized facilities, and we got to deliver on that promise. So I think that's definitely one of the things this committee needs to do. But I thought that the end game was the referendum.
Okay.
Kathy's on.
Mel, are you ready?
Yeah. Yes, I'm ready. I listened to everybody so far, and I think Dick's got a good grasp of where I think the committee should go. Thank you. I think you have to set up this committee where it becomes something close to an ongoing committee as the growth continues, and the managing of the facilities is a big part of that growth. But I think you can't lose sight of the changing process of educating as we go forward, and what kind of facilities it's going to take to manage the resource, the growth of population and the other resources that's available. So I, think that your committee should be watching the growth and trying to analyze where we are with facility use. That's a beginning point. I do believe that the end goal of referendums and what we're asking for and how we're using what we have to be integrated very, effectively with the academic part of the component. I think the instructional part and how we teach, what we teach, and where we're going to teach it from is a big part of how we're going to have to go forward. Not just build a school because the growth is here, but what kind of school and who can it serve? And how can a school that's being less used, not used now, to be used to facilitate something different? All of that is a part of what academics got to help us do along with facility use. Facility, people can't design the academic program. So I think we like Tina says, we got a big elephant in front of us, but we need to understand what our role is going to be in the future in this committee. 10 years from now, what a committee like this looks to be doing as it is doing right now today. The next referendum is the immediate task, but it can also impact the future referendum if we're not doing it right. So that's my 10 cents worth. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mel. Kathy, do you have anything you want to add?
I think she might have left us.
Okay,
She's off.
okay. Dr. Campbell, do you have any comments?
I'm more of a listener today, but I am brainstorming ideas. And I know when we prepared for our last referendum, the K-8 was a issue. What was the benefit of having a K-8 versus middle school? And so I know that our department did a little research on that in terms of the pros and cons. The one thing that I'm thinking of just in my capacity here at the district office is thinking in terms of the virtual component to education. I do know that there are a lot of parents last year wanted a virtual option outside of what we provided, and they opted for other avenues for education. So I was just thinking in terms of future planning, how do we plan to accommodate different learning styles for our students? So those were some of the thoughts that I was thinking as I heard the conversation.
Good, thank you. So let me turn to the operations group. Ready? What do you think?
I was thinking more or less like Dr. Campbell in reference to the K-8 model versus the middle school model. How will it best serve our students in Beaufort County? Just thinking about the neighborhood campus where we have enough property. We need to build both a middle school and elementary school, which is going to be best for our students. I've been thinking about the Ladies Island Middle campus, and you posed the question about K-8 as well there. We just have to make sure it's going to be in the best interest of all of our students that we're serving in the district. And you're right, CUSA has maybe 5 or 6 mobiles out there right now. That, I mean, they should be mobiles because we should have building capacity. So we'd have to redraw some lines to make that work. That's going to bring a lot of issues when we go to do that, because no one wants to leave. So it's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because there has to be a lot of buy-in from the public and
Right.
to understand why we're doing what we're doing. So once we lay it out for the public so they can understand it, we have to move forward.
Great, thank you. Tanya, thoughts?
Again, I'm listening today as well, and I'm interested, of course, in the financial areas, impact fees. You mentioned finding funds for shovel-ready programs and just the funding for potential referendum projects. So I just want to understand as this develops how the finance committee plays into this role as well, because generally, you bring projects or ideas for projects and then we identify funding for them. And so, I don't know how this will all work with the kind of 3 committees now working on this. So, but I am open to, seeing it through and, gaining information from, on the projects so that we can,
Right.
or whatever, progress we want to make in certain areas like impact fees and how that will work and how the finance committee, plays into that. So.
Lastly but not least, Robert, what do you think?
Well, I'm excited about every topic and every item you've listed. So I'm just here to support you. I think it's great. I'm ready to get started.
Well, that goes back to Dr. Graz's comment. And when I gave you that laundry list, the last thing I mentioned was milestone. And the milestone has to be, just as you mentioned, Tina, we got to get ready for this next referendum. We were talking about a referendum in November 2023, correct?
It's been the latest conversation.
That's the
yes.
latest conversation we've been talking about. Well, that's less than a year and a half away.
Mhm.
And we've got a lot of work to do to get ready to do that. It starts with the assessment. It then goes to bonding and finance. We have to have some idea of what we're going to have to borrow to make this happen. So that seems to be number one on the milestone list is assessment. Where are we now? We have the minutes and so on from the committee that walked around and looked at all. What's changed? I think a significant amount has changed. I don't think we have the time or necessarily need to do another, but that's something we could talk about, to have another citizens group go out and look at the schools that are remaining and help us prioritize. Basically, it's everything that we haven't done this time. So, you know, that part of it, as far as where the priorities are, I think we can still use the priorities for that. The only thing we can't use is the dollar amount that we put to that. Because you remember, it was over $600 million for the total bill. Well, it's not we've got 344. It's not 344 minus 600 mil to what we're going to need now. I can tell you for sure. But that's why that's assessment seems to be first priority is assessment. But that assessment has to be not only assessment of what we have now, but what we need in near term. So we have to say, we need to know what we have. And for example, and I'm not saying this is what we're going to do we need to tear down Ladies Island Middle School and build a K-8? If that's it, then we're going to know that helps us start with the funding to do that. In fact, we ought to have a pretty good idea after Robert Smalls of the K-8 of what it would cost, and maybe we could take that plan and just pick it up and put it right down there. I'm not saying that's what we're going to do, but that's the process to go to the bonding. Then we need to look at the impact fees. Can we get it established in time? Can we collect impact fees north of the Broad? Right now, we couldn't, even if they approved it, because our study didn't support that, right?
Correct. There is.
It's only south.
They would have to experience growth and the need for additional seats.
Right.
In our buildings.
Right. That's another part of the assessment is we need to confirm our growth figures that Carol has in here and whether or not that has taken into account, for example, on Salem Road, 2 major subdivisions, one a subdivision and one an apartment complex, all of whom are price ranged for kids. Is there other things in the unincorporated part of the county that's going on that we don't know about? I know there's stuff going on, an apartment behind Walmart. Yep, and Castle Rock Road is coming up. So that's also part of the assessment. Seems like that would be the first thing we should be doing. And we talk to the full board and say, we got to start get right on the assessment piece right away. And then that will drive the bonding, the impact fees conversation, and the referendum strategy of how to get this. And that's one of the things to look at for the property, for example. The property piece, a lot of that's up here north of the Broad. The Ladies Island Middle, could we sell that in time to be able to use the proceeds for that to diminish the amount of money we need to borrow? I don't know. The King Street, whether or not that could be sold, what it could be sold for, we don't even probably haven't even had it assessed value of what that thing's worth. Will it be Go property? We got to talk to the county because they're the ones that should be buying it or selling it or trading for it. We also need to look at this property right out here behind the solar array, that maybe they still want to buy that over in Islands of Beaufort. I think we owe it to the taxpayer to utilize our assets properly. So would the committee agree to put, when we go to the full board, saying our first item of our scope is a quick and comprehensive, which is kind of an oxymoron, assessment of where we are, and we're going to have to do this in the next 60 days, I think. And that's going to be a bunch of work to do that. So that we can then start looking at what we're going to recommend to the full board as to what our near-term strategy is to build the next referendum. The other stuff, the pre-K, all the other stuff that I mentioned is down as after that. We need to, the only thing I could see that we need to have done in this assessment is the CTE. Because we have to design that CTE within the next, when are you going to have to get that going?
We'll probably go out for architects this fall.
This fall, we got to decide what's going in there. What CTE are we going to put in that building? Because the architect needs that to do the planning work that he will need. Comments?
I think, oh, I'm sorry. I think all of that's fine what you just said. The other thing I think we need to look at long-term is the new state superintendent. She is definitely for vouchers, and you gotta think about 19 new people coming on in Columbia this year, come January. And they're talking about giving parents vouchers, send their kids to private school and also Christian school. So those are some things, because we're gonna be, if that happens, we're gonna be losing some students.
Yeah. Dr. Gauze.
Yeah, Dick, I agree with what you kind of summed it up as. I think we need to look at our, like you said, comprehensive, but also, I guess, a comprehensive review, but a concise report of our current facilities and as well as we already mentioned, land or facilities that are perhaps could be utilized in a different manner. And what are the immediate needs of the district in terms of satisfying our enrollment and projected enrollment over just a few years, because that is what is most important for determining the referendum projects, as you and David have mentioned. And so I think we just have to, I don't think we can set the scope for, forevermore. I think we just have to say that our immediate scope is blah, blah. And once we accomplish that, we'll have to come back to the board with what's our next task, kind of a thing. But I think we need to start out with looking, and especially I think the public, we're charged with utilizing our resources to the max in the public's best interest. And I think we have to show that do our due diligence and show that that's what we're doing.
Okay. Mel, do you have anything you want to add?
For the 100th time, but I do believe that you have to do what she said, but you can't do it unless you look further ahead. You can't do it with real, fiduciary responsibility unless you're looking beyond the immediate timetable, particularly when it comes to schools.
Got it. David, anything you want to add?
Well, I think you all are on the right track. You need that short-term goal, which is the referendum. And then you can develop a long-term strategy on that. Because, as I mentioned before, we have got to deliver that assessment of north of the Broad facilities because we promised that.
Right.
So we got to deliver that.
Yeah, it would really be easy if we had a couple elementary schools north of the Broad that were at 50% or less of capacity. We could just meld one to the two into one, but that's not what we got. We've got multiple schools at 70% capacity, so there's not going to be a resizing without additional construction. I mean, any way you look at it. But it's also probably going to mean that somebody is going to lose a school. And that's not an easy business. And so that's one of the things that we have to be very cognizant of when we do the assessment. Hopefully, something will just pop out as so logical that it will be an easy decision. But I doubt that. I doubt that we'll get that. And so that is one of the challenges we're going to have to do. And also, we're going to have to make sure the public knows that this is just initial discussion. It's initial planning, that we won't go before the board, or the board won't go to the public until we've had a chance to let the public comment. But is that fair?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Tina?
Yes.
Okay. All right. How about this? How about I distill all the things that we've mentioned here and let me put some words to paper, and I'll send it to the committee members. And if we can get approval of the words that the committee members agree, then I'll present that at the meeting. Is that okay with Dr. Guaz and Earl?
Yeah, it's fine.
Is that all right?
I just think we have to be careful because we're circumventing FOIA because I just think, I think your idea is good. Why don't you come up with, a distillation of what we spoke about or how you could summarize what the scope would be. And then you could circulate it to Earl and I, and we could just provide feedback rather than approval, because approval means we voted.
Yeah.
And then bring it to the board. And then if we want to make additional, suggestions or whatever, we could do it in open session. I just don't want people to think, oh, we're working behind closed doors and they didn't hear the discussion. And,
Good point there.
Okay.
Good point. What do you think, David?
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Because the sleepers are asleep, but they haven't gone away.
You're right. Mel, is that all right?
Mel is gone.
He's gone?
Mel's
Okay.
gone.
Okay. Freddie, Tanya, Robert, is that any issues with that? Dr. Campbell, any issues?
She's gone. She stepped away too.
She stepped away as well? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, how about next meeting? I think we're gonna need to do one within the next 2 weeks, after we get feedback from the board.
Yeah.
So, Tina, are you going to be available the weeks from now, which is?
No, I'm going to be out of town on vacation and I won't have good internet.
Yeah.
July 20th. I hate to say this publicly. Can I text you
Yeah,
Dates,
Yeah.
I don't want to say it publicly.
yeah, I understand.
Okay.
We wouldn't want your house burglarized.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay,
Can I just share with, get some dates, if you can send your dates of your availability, of what dates work for you and time, and then we can match those up.
That sounds good.
yeah, I'm free.
Okay.
I can go. Let Robin will coordinate with us for the next meeting date.
Perfect.
I just got hers.
Okay.
Would you like staff to prepare a milestone? Kind of, if you're talking about a next referendum and some of our big projects we already know about, such as Hilton Head High School design and construction, and the Cape Building, May River design and construction. And if we had a new building, what kind of timeline we recommend or something like that?
Yeah, what, if you could bring that, that would be good. If Tanya,
I was gonna say things like when you have to approve a motion
right,
in order to make the election. So
exactly,
that kind of
exactly. Yeah, that would be very helpful. And Tanya, I think the finance committee, put that on a next agenda topic for the finance committee to discuss bonding strategy.
Because one philosophy is figuring out the amount of money you have available if we do not raise the millage. And do we build a referendum to that number? So you don't raise the millage, or you build referendum and then those two strategies. You can
Well, that's a really good discussion. And a lot of it we don't know because we don't know what the value of the mill is going to be. We know that the value of the mill is going to increase. So we may be able to keep with 36 mills, but still have enough revenue that 36 mills may bring a lot more money than it does right now.
Mhm.
So
A 1% growth factor is considered in all of our estimates out for the next, 30 years. So if we have some value that's greater than that, then we have extra, and it puts us in a better position. And right now, $300 million additional dollars is sort of a placeholder for a potential second referendum, and the financing plan covers that amount. So if without any need for increased millage.
okay. We're going to have to look at, we have a reassessment year coming up too. And that's another bogey that we don't know what kind of effect we're going to have on that. So, okay, I got it. Any other comments from anyone, board members, visitors? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank
Sorry I
you.
was late.
Bye.